April 5th Planning Commission meeting. First thing we'll do is stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Angie, can we have a roll call, please?
Holdcamp,
Here.
LaRue,
Here.
Moody,
Here.
Odine,
Here.
Prendergast,
Here.
Woolsey.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have approval of the minutes from the January 26th Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee and the March 7th Planning Commission meeting.
Move approval of the minutes.
Second.
First and second, questions or comments on the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Now it's time for public comments. Is there anybody in the audience have something they want to say? Now would be the time to come on up.
Hi, I'm Dave Curtin. I'm with Lamar Advertising. We have 2 billboard signs within the city, and it on the agenda, it looks like today is basically a review of the general zoning options for the electronic reader boards. So I'm available if there are any questions. Otherwise, from what you guys have or what you're looking at, it looks like there's up to 3 possible options in every regulatory aspect. So there are some that are more beneficial to us to be able to modernize our signs. But I guess I don't necessarily know which way exactly you guys are looking anyways, but I'm available for questions in the process. So.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Yep, come on up. Do we have a sign-up sheet up there? Okay. If they can, I'm sorry. Can you please sign in your name and address and all that fun stuff? Sorry about that.
I'm Phil Larson. We have the real estate office across from Walgreens. And I'm not a public speaker, so this is like but I've done a lot of information gathering on electronic signs and reader boards and that kind of thing. Before we purchased ours, I searched the world to find one. I had the codes and everything, and wanted just a red or an amber, basic sign that moved once an hour. Found out you really can't buy anything like that anymore. It's like walking into Verizon going, I want a cell phone without a camera. Well, here, they all come with cameras. Mm-hmm. And that's what these signs do now, is they all come with the ability to change as often as you want. The LEDs can make any color in the rainbow. They can make pictures. And some of the ordinance parts that I've thought about a lot is the part where it gets into like no pictures. And I can see, and I know we don't want to have a distractions. I understand that. And I also understand we don't want to be like the Las Vegas or the Dells. But I think if we could get to like Baldwin or New Richmond, I mean, that's what I would like to see, just get to that level. And like if Quick Trip, they had a sign where they had a picture of a banana and 39 cents next to it. And that was so easy to read, you drove by. Then I inadvertently tripped up in the office and got them turned in as I was citing examples. So then we come back and now they have spelled out, we have bananas for sale for 39 cents a pound. And that takes way longer to read to get the same message across. It didn't really, and I get what the point was, that we didn't want to get out of control and wanted to keep it simple, but it just kind of got weird. And then I tried to get the special permit. I came in to apply for that because I thought, well, this is what I got to do, because that's what I saw that the college had in their hockey arena there. And they basically turned me down before I even got to apply. I walked in with my check. It was $1,200, so I walked in with my check and ready to go. And I said, here, I want this. And they said, well, we'll get back to you, Phil. And then they called me a week or two later and said, it's going to be turned down, so don't apply. They said, we're not doing these at this time. And I thought that was kind of weird. And then I read through the special permits sections, the A, B, and C there. All of them are completely subjective. Like there's no like meat and potatoes where I can go, this is what it has to be. It's just, it was very vague and totally language that's up to the judgment of the person. And what I thought about that is if you grant one, like you grant one to the college or whoever, it appears favoritism to everyone else that gets turned down. And the people get turned down, they think it's discrimination because you can't, those 3 bullet points, you can't find anything in there that really says what in the world we're doing here. And does it have community impact? You know, well, how do, you know, there's not, I think it should be broken down if we're going to have that and say X, Y, Z, here's factual things we can use to compare that. The other thing in the sign regulations that I've looked at, when I first put our sign up, they told me about I call it the topo rule that's written here, where if your sign falls over, it can't fall on the street or the boulevard setback, you know, the 23 feet or whatever it is that where the sidewalk and all that would be. Which, and I get that back in the, you know, back when people would take a post hole digger, put a 4x4 in there and put some kind of a wood sign on there, and I could see where that would probably fall over. But now if you're doing a reader board or anything like that, like my sign, I even bought a pretty low-end version of it, and it was over $20,000. And so I'm not going to build a structure that won't hold my $20,000 sign. So it should be, I think the onus should be on building a structure that's solid. And when they first, with the previous city engineer, I went round and around with him on this. And the thing that was unusual about it was, you know, he said, well, you can't have it if there's a tornado or a huge storm. We don't want it falling over onto the sidewalk or in the street. And I thought, if we had a tornado down Main Street, is my sign really what we're worried about? You know, and it just didn't seem that. It seemed like that was way overkill for something that might happen in a huge catastrophe where the whole town's blown up. The dang Phil sign blew over. You know, that's what we're going to worry about. So that seemed a little odd to me too. And then there's some in the new regulations. There's some stuff about where you want to regulate the size and stuff of the print, and that's another area that seemed unusual. In that, you know, if you try to make, if as a sign owner, if I'm going to make a sign that I want people to read, I'm not going to make it into tiny little print and put a whole bunch of lines, which is kind of what the thing says. We're going to have a minimum height and minimum size, minimum length and font. People who own signs will do that on their own because you don't want tiny little print. And I get the thing, well, we don't want to have some guy writing, you know, a verse of the Bible all the way across here and cramming it in. But if they did, you couldn't see it anyway. And we're kind of, you know, taking a, you know, and then, but then I want to be quick here. The other thing we had was on the, that I couldn't put on there, like if a kid has cancer and he's having a fundraiser on next Wednesday, I want to put up there, you know, fundraiser for Jimmy Smith, Wednesday at 7 o'clock. Well, there's rules in here where it says I can only do something that has to do with my business. So it just seemed, or I can't, you know, it just seems like we're regulating speech there. That why do you want to get into that, and why do you want to enforce it? I mean, have Angie and Dave trying to walk around town going, well, you know, he's talking about a kid with cancer, and that's not his thing. They don't want to get tied up in that. So, and that was the thing, you know, that's the kind of thing too. I think this should be kind of pared down to something simple, and that kind of understands that anyone who purchases it, and because if you tried to buy what the current code says, you know, a red sign that is stagnant for an hour, you can't just buy that anymore. They don't make it. They all come with multicolors. And if you did, because I thought, well, I can just go find an old one and, you know, reuse it and put it on there. Well, then I did that, and I found out those old ones are chock full of mercury and all these other hazardous chemicals. Like, well, I don't want to hang a chemical waste dump in my front yard, you know. So that's where we're kind of caught in a pinch here between how the signs have modernized and they can do everything. You know, you can't buy a basic red sign anymore. And I'm around town, so if anyone ever needs to talk about any of this, I can go on with you for a long time, but I won't take your whole day. So I appreciate you taking time to listen to me.
Thanks. Anybody else in the audience? Okay. Move on to ordinance and resolutions. First one is a proposal for annexation and rezoning for property located at 99 Highway 35 and 101 Highway 35. This will be for the New Life Worship Center. And Sam's going to give us a presentation on this.
Good evening, Mayor, and Plan Commissioners. I'm Sam Burns, a planner with the City of River Falls. I'll be presenting on a proposed annexation on the northeast end of the city. As the mayor stated, a unanimous petition for annexation has been submitted by Keith Fletcher for 99 and 101 Highway 35. Keith is a minister for New Life Church and is looking to build a church for his congregation. The applicant also plans to convert the existing structure into church offices and construct a youth center on site in the future. The two parcels combine to approximately 4.07 acres. The Plan Commission's role in annexation is to provide a recommendation to City Council on the land use and zoning aspects of the proposed annexation. As you can see, the subject parcels are outlined in blue in the map above. There are two factors for the Plan Commission to consider in determining whether to recommend an annexation. One is the location contiguous to the city, and two is the present use or proposed use of the annexation compatible with the surrounding land use. The image above shows land that is to be annexed outlined in blue. The property is adjacent to Wistop property, which is within the city boundary. The subject property is therefore contiguous to the city boundary. The future land use zoning for the site is designated as community commercial. The extraterritorial zoning is commercial. Staff is recommending applying a zoning classification of B3 highway commercial to keep it consistent with the future land use map and the extraterritorial zoning designation. The proposed use of a church is permitted in a B3 highway commercial zone. In summary, the proposed annexation area is contiguous with city boundaries, and the use of the property as a church is permitted in a B3 highway commercial district. This is anticipated to be compatible with surrounding land uses, and staff recommends that the request for annexation and application of a B3 highway commercial district zoning classification for the properties be forwarded to the City Council with a favorable recommendation. I'll defer back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Sam. So I'll take a motion on this first.
I move that we forward the ordinance annexing this property with a favorable recommendation to City Council.
Second.
Okay, first and second, questions, comments?
Just one question, Sam. The access to the property, is that a separate road, that light gray line on the, I guess, to the east of the slip road, the exit ramp?
Yeah, so I believe the access is off of 35 right there.
Okay, good. That's
Frontage road there.
I just
Yeah.
wondered, it's not but it's not the exit ramp.
Nope,
No,
it is
no,
a
no.
separate frontage road. It's just a little bit hard to see what the boundaries of the WISDOT borders right there.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to be like people coming off the highway.
Oh,
Nope,
no.
shouldn't be an issue. And there's existing businesses, Hovey Auto Bodies right there. So, yep.
Thanks.
Anybody else?
Just curious, was this the old Spiel House? Dutch Spiel
Yeah, that
House?
area,
It was. I was back there. I'm like going, I used to go roller skating here. Okay.
Okay, so we got a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next we'll go on to reports. First one up will be Emily's gonna introduce us to the consultant for the electronic sign ordinance discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Mark Roffers with MD Roffers Consulting will be joining us virtually. So I think we'll see him larger than life pretty soon. So this is being brought to you. Mark had a good summary memo in your packet, but we've been approached by folks in kind of 3 different areas about electronic signs. And so as we heard in public comment, there are the existing billboards out by Whitetail Ridge, and there's a desire by the company to transition those from static billboards to digital billboards, and that's currently not allowed by our code. And then we've got some churches and institutional uses that are located in residential districts that can't have illuminated signs or electronic signs. And so they've wanted to, again, be able to do more messaging, have something internally lit, possibly have an electronic sign. And there are churches in business districts that can do that. And there are some churches that have gotten special sign permits to allow them to do that. So again, we're thinking, okay, we're getting these requests. And as noted, a special sign permit, if we're issuing a number of them, and there isn't really a unique circumstance there, we need to think about whether we should change the regulation. And then the third category are the businesses that can have electronic signs right now that want to utilize more capacity of those signage, as you heard earlier. So what we've got for you tonight are some options to either keep things exactly the way they are. It's working just fine as is. We can keep some things just the way they are and modify them a little, or we can modify them a little bit more. So there's no pressure to do anything, or we could make some changes as you think might be appropriate for the community. And Mark's going to talk a little bit about the purpose of a sign code. But again, thinking about when we do these regulations, we're thinking about health, safety, and welfare. That's what is our main focus when we do any kind of new regulation. And so, and with signage, there are First Amendment protections on speech. And so we can regulate location of signs, size of signs, number of signs, the duration of signs, whether they're a temporary sign or a permanent sign, but we can't regulate what they say. So we're really thinking about the character of the signs and then functionality from a perspective of maybe safety, particularly with signage where there's vehicles passing by. And then thinking about signs, really the purpose from a city perspective of signage being wayfinding, helping people get to the locations that they're going. But there's also an advertising and marketing component, that kind of an economic development component to signage as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Mark.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you, Plan Commission, for allowing me to participate virtually. It's a lousy way to meet people, but hopefully it's good enough for us to charge forward and obtain from you a direction for where you want to head on this issue. Just as a further point of introduction, I've been, as my head and gray beard suggest, I've been doing this for a while. I've been a planner in Wisconsin for 30 years. I've worked with a number of communities, including places like Whitewater and La Crosse that have some similar issues, I suppose, as River Falls. I graduated from the Humphrey Institute and University of Minnesota many, many years ago. So I do have some reasonably local and related connections, I think. And I've worked on sign regulations in a number of places, and I'll put them in the top 5 of controversial issues next to sidewalks as it relates to planning, multiple family housing, and probably a few others. And it's also very complicated. It is hard to weed your way through anyone's sign regulations to understand what can be done. And that's in part based on some of the information that Emily suggested, is it's got a variety of different purposes, and it's regulated not only by what the state tells us we can do, but by First Amendment rulings and other legal matters at the federal level. So I started, just to start my presentation, I thought it would be fun to just do a Google search on electronic reader board, or variable message signs as they're often referred to nowadays. And it came up with this graphic here. So, you know, what's currently allowed by city regulations within commercial and university zoning districts are signs like this, pretty basic electronic reader board signs, using, as was suggested earlier, either only red or only amber in color. But as you know, if you've been to the Wisconsin Dells, Las Vegas, or other places, the sky's really the limit in terms of what the technology offers. You know, basically, versions of your home television are placed along streets are certainly possible. A lot of fast food reader boards are now this style of sign. Institutions, as was suggested earlier, whether they're churches, schools, or whatnot, tend to use these to advertise coming events and things like that in other communities. So there are a variety of different potential applications, including billboards or off-premise advertising applications, where in many cases, at least for highly trafficked areas, certain signs are being converted or constructed as LED LED billboards. So that's really what we're dialed into tonight. There were a couple issues discussed already, and I'm sure a couple of other issues you have with the sign ordinance that we're not really trying to tackle here. It's not to say they're not important, but our focus here is on dealing with this particular issue, particularly as construction season begins and people start thinking about doing new projects. Emily mentioned sort of the why we're doing this, or what is the purpose of sign regulations, and there's a couple of different reasons for regulating signs and sign regulations. I'll remove this image at least from the screen. I will get to this in a second. Let me just pause sharing. There we go. And some of these are directly from your ordinance, the purpose statements. As Emily mentioned, one of the main purposes of sign regulations is lessen threats to public safety from poorly constructed or maintained signs, prevent hazards to life and property. One of your speakers mentioned this a little bit earlier, is making sure that signs don't fall on top of people as a kind of a basic thing, but also dealing with a little less direct safety issues, viewing, and this gets to the second issue, hazards to traffic, making sure that there's not sign clutter, or signs are not placed in such a way that they become confused with traffic signs, or provide so much clutter along the travelways that befuddle a driver or make it very difficult to understand sign messages. Other purposes within the sign regulations of the city are to ensure compatibility of location, size, and placement of signs. Sign regulations are not created equally by zoning district. There are zoning districts, for example, commercial and industrial, where tolerance for larger signs or more numerous signs is much greater than in residential or a conservancy zoning district. So sign regulations are including cities, are scaled to the surroundings. Another important purpose, and actually this is stated right in the ordinance, is to preserve the natural beauty and attractiveness of the city. So there's a specific intent of the city's sign regulations that looks matter, and people's impression are often formed of a community, for better or worse, by places where you can see a lot of signage. The main streets into a community, and so that is a specific intent of the sign regulations. And aesthetics are something we can look at, legally, for sure. Now, interestingly, a couple of things that Emily mentioned, and then I'll touch on more for purposes of signs, are not specifically mentioned in the sign regulations, but are important. And one of them is to provide reasonable advertising and identification opportunities for businesses so that they can grow and thrive within the community. And so that can't be overlooked. And to provide benefit to the public, to find businesses, churches, other locations within the community, so they can get around successfully without too much difficulty. And another purpose of the sign regulations that we have to kind of keep in mind is to maintain compliance with federal law, and in particular First Amendment. And there was not too long ago a court decision that said, in a nutshell, that we can't regulate signs based on what you see on the sign or the message that the sign delivers. So, in other words, if you have to read the sign to regulate it, that's not a appropriate regulation. So those are all things we have to keep in mind when thinking about sign regulations. So to one of the earlier speakers' comments, we probably can't discourage people from having a banana on their sign, or say that they have to they can provide this type of message on their sign, but not that type of message. Now, there are exceptions for off-premise advertising signage under this federal law, that it can be treated differently, and there have been recent court decisions that have upheld that in our district and state. So that does play in. But those are the main purposes of sign regulations. Why is the city in the business of regulating signs in the first place? And there are different levels of sign regulation and different levels of involvement the city can apply. And I guess that's a good transition to this matrix that I have here on screen, or I will have once again on screen here. And it's the same matrix that was in the Plan Commission packet. And what we have here, and what we, as Emily and I discussed this issue, is before we jump to conclusions and say, oh, here's an ordinance amendment of what we think you guys should do to change the sign regulations, we felt, and I hope you agree, that it was a better approach to have a broader conversation about what do we really want to accomplish with respect to electronic reader board or variable message signs going forward. And so the matrix that you had in your packet and this before you provides 3 alternative general approaches to tackling this issue, and also touches on the issue of on and off-premise signs or billboards, as they're referred to in the zoning ordinance. The first column of this graphic shows 14 different aspects that we can address and probably should address to some extent within regulations that affect electronic reader board or variable message signs. So that's what the first column is. And then the second through fourth columns address 3 broad approaches that the city could take to tackling this issue. With the second column being a summary of what the city's current approach is to tackling this issue. So we have a definition of this type of sign. We have zoning districts in which they are currently allowed. Those are the commercial and university zoning districts. We have size configurations. So if a particular zoning district allows a maximum sign, a size of say 150 feet, the variable message component can only be 60% of that. I should have picked 100. I'm not really great at math, but I guess that probably equals 90 square feet of the 150 square foot sign. And so there are other standards, including the ones that we've talked about regarding colors, was touched on about the frequency of message changing, which is no more than 1 time per hour between 6 a.m. and 12 a.m. It sort of begs the question as to what happens overnight. And the ordinance is not terribly clear on that. But these are so the second column are the current regulations for electronic message signs in the city. So again, as Emily mentioned, we could maintain those regulations. We could maintain them with some slight tweaks to, for example, describe what happens overnight in terms of message opportunities. And that would be that maintenance option or approach in that second column. The third and the fourth column are, broadly speaking, both efforts or proposals to modernize the city's regulations for electronic reader board signs and variable message signs. Since the regulations were adopted, perhaps since we started discussing it tonight, the technology has improved dramatically and the price has decreased dramatically of these types of signs. And so modernizing language might be a good idea to get us into the 21st century, or at least the 2020s, on terminology. The third column is an approach that says, okay, we're going to modernize it, but we're still going to maintain fairly tight limits. So maybe we tilt a little bit more towards the protecting natural beauty and aesthetics and minimizing potential conflicts with traffic, and the understanding of users as they drive by a handful of variable message signs in a block spacing, for instance. And then the other approach is, let's modernize it, but let's also expand where we can do these signs. for example, allowing them in hospital and school zones, allowing them for institutional uses like churches and the like. And then either expanding or removing certain regulations on how much of a sign can be variable message versus static message, and other aspects where the regulations could just be shrunk, and the attitude could be, let's let the market decide on a variety of these topics. So these are all oversimplifications in a couple of different respects. First, I would be surprised if you directed me and Emily to say, we're going to pick exactly one and just execute that 100%. And that's what we're going to do. There are also simplifications in that, but by and large, this is not like legal ordinance language that you're seeing in this table. So we're going to have to spend some time based on the approach you advise us on to crafting that type of language to make it clearer and easy to interpret and apply later on. So as I mentioned, at a subsequent meeting, we'll have a draft ordinance amendment to bring to you, and then we'll get into the picky points of, whether this should be 60% or 65% and that kind of detail, which I don't want us to get too hung up on here this evening. We're going to go through a little exercise tonight. Emily and the mayor are going to help out in getting your individual opinions, if possible, on your preferred column, and where you might have an opinion that's different than your preferred column on one of these rows, what you think we should do in that way. And then I think we'll have an opportunity to discuss, what the results are, and hopefully come to some consensus, or at least a majority direction as to how you'd like us to head on this topic. I'm going to pause now, and before we go through this exercise I'm talking about, I wanted to do two things, and we may have done one of them already. I wanted to ask you what are the clarifying questions on either what the current ordinance is or what the options are, the need, what some of these alternative approaches mean in these cells. I want to make sure that everyone has a good foundation for what we're doing here tonight before we ask you to do it. And then this related to that, and to the extent that the members of the audience might have additional comments, I'd certainly welcome those at this time before we go through this exercise. So with that, I think I'll turn it back to the mayor and to see if there are any commission member comments, questions, clarification needs next. Thank you.
Well, I guess it's up to you guys. Does anybody have any clarifying questions they need from? Is it Roffers? Am I saying that right?
You got it exactly right.
Perfect. From Mr. Roffers, or any questions at all about the different columns, what some of it means, if not clear? Are we all pretty?
What jumps out at me is when you invite someone like Tattersaw to come to our city, and they have so many events out there, and I think people are interested in them. And I don't know that a red or amber sign would help you as you're going by Tattersaw to understand that someone's wedding, or there's some kind of an event out there. So we are kind of moving into a more modern business. I don't know what overnight means. Down at the bottom, do signs have to be turned off overnight? Well, night is different in the winter than in the summertime. And it looks like we don't have timing on that. We just decide what, and I'm not real sure what we identify as downtown. Clearly, Tattersall is not downtown, but is Westwind downtown? Those type of questions kind of brought up in my head.
I can get to the downtown piece.
Okay.
So we have a downtown overlay district in our ordinance. That's roughly the main street downtown from south of Division to around Cascade. Sam is.
And a couple blocks on either side of the river, if that makes sense. But yeah, think of it kind of that block that Emily laid out.
Yep. And so there are special standards that apply in that area because of sort of the historic character. So again, to the aesthetic component that Mark was talking about, we have different regulations for those downtown areas than we have on North Main and South Main for some of our other commercial districts.
Yes, it's the dark blue line on the map, being helpfully shown.
Yep. And then to the overnight piece, that is something that we can think about because some sign codes will say, I think there is, and Mark maybe knows better than I do what the technical standard is, but there's sort of a dusk dawn.
Yeah.
And so when you have electronic signs, brightness is a key performance standard with them. So you want them to dim overnight or when it starts to become that dusk to dawn time period. And then they need to be brighter during the day when there's more ambient light. And one of the things that a lot of new signs have are the ability to automatically adjust to ambient light conditions. But ordinances can set kind of maximum brightness levels as well for that dusk to dawn period to make sure that it's not going to exceed, be too bright at night. And then in some cases, signs will have an automatic shut off. So if there's some thing that goes on the fritz, rather than it blinking or becoming too bright or not dimming, it just gets shut off. I do know that there are some signs that don't necessarily have that dimming capability. And so if they can't meet that sort of maximum brightness for that dusk to dawn, then they would need to basically shut off during that time period. And that's the kind of thing where if someone goes with a less expensive model, then they have less capabilities, things like that.
And are all those applied to the Falcon Center? The sign that they have out there?
So I'm not sure what was in their special sign permit standards, but I think that they do have some automatic brightness adjustments. I don't know that we've had any complaints, Angie, about it being too bright at various times or things like that.
Yeah, and there's an apartment right there. So if you're not having complaints from the people in the apartment, it can't be that bad.
It's also a fairly bright section of town with the
Yeah.
streetlights on that strip of South Main, so it's bright dawn to dusk or dusk to dawn anyways.
Right.
And then the university's got more than one color as well.
Correct.
Yes. So more questions?
Yeah, on the section actually where you're at on the screen right now, changing between 6 and 10 seconds, and then scrolling does not exceed 10 seconds. So I assume scrolling not to exceed 10 seconds means you're not putting like a sentence that's going to scroll across, and people are going to sit there in their car trying to read the whole sentence that scrolls across. And then the 6 to 10 second transition or duration seems pretty fast. Is that standard? Is that kind of a normal time frame for these kinds of signs?
So I think you've hit on one issue, is that you don't want the change time to be so fast that a normal human can't process what they're seeing. So that's the idea of 6 seconds. Now you might argue that that's not enough. The 10-second, the general idea with that is that you're not, say you're driving down the street at 35 miles an hour, someone's got something on their board, and I don't know if you can see me, but you don't have to keep craning your neck back. I wonder what the last sentence of this message says. So that's the idea to having a maximum length. Now the city's current approach addresses that by basically saying, it's basically the same message for an hour, and then you can have a new message for the next hour. More modern approaches allow a little bit more flexibility in that regard. But you could maintain the message of, hey, these are basically going to be static. You're going to have bananas 39 cents for an hour, and then you talk about your spotted cow price for the next hour.
I guess that's related to a question I have. We call them variable message signs, but there's modes that you can have of a variable message sign that make it so it's static. So if someone says, oh, I have a variable message sign, but I'm gonna keep my sign up for a duration that's fairly long, it kind of by default becomes a static sign. And so I don't know how that plays into making decisions about the rules. And so
Yeah.
that's just something I want to throw out there is, would we say that it's static? If a sign is up for an hour, that's considered a static sign, even though it's using a variable message sign.
I would think it would be static for that period of time, but I think the whole idea is that these signs change sometime.
Mhm.
I mean,
Right.
without you having to repaint it
Right.
or something. So I would think it's still a variable message sign if it's got that
Right.
capabilities. As long as we're jumping in with comments, I very much appreciate the discussion and the grid that we've got here. It's very helpful in laying out some of the issues. And I think that I'm interested in doing something that kind of acknowledges what technology makes available, but that also isn't. I mean, I can't imagine anything worse than looking like the Dells. So that also keeps the maybe has some size restrictions, certainly some location restrictions. Kind of keeps the character of us as a nice, clean little university town. But that does have some opportunities for schools and for churches to announce their events, for businesses to announce public like the cancer fundraiser or the Legion Hall spaghetti feed or kind of public events like that. But yeah, that doesn't allow people to go too crazy.
So you're transitioning, and this is okay, but into offering your opinion on direction, and I definitely wanted to do that, but I wanted to make sure that we all knew what we were looking at before doing that, or if you had particular questions or on what it is that is in this matrix.
So do we have any more questions? Is there things people don't understand what's on the?
I have one more question
Yep.
about the color limitation in the modernize and limit approach. It talks about owner's choice of one color. Is that one color per message? Like, can it flip from blue to red to yellow to,
We can talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So right now, it's kind of that idea that right now we allow either amber or red. And typically the way those signs are manufactured, it's going to be one or the other. So it's not that it could change from amber to red and back again with the way that those are manufactured. But with some of the new technology, if they can change, what do we think? Do we still want just really kind of a uniform color? Maybe that's less distracting. If there's a picture of a banana, it needs to be green if the message is green, or if it's a picture of a hamburger and, the color is red, the hamburger is red, it's not multicolored kind of a thing. So it's still, we want just one color on the message, but you can pick what it is. And you could say, well, one color, but it's, if your brand is green, it's always going to be green kind of a thing. Or you could say, I'd be open to that changing. It could be but one color per message.
Okay.
And for some of these, it was easy to put what would be the modernized but limit in this cell. For others, it was maybe a little bit of a stretch. That might have been one where it was a bit of a stretch to create this, hypothetical approach. And that might be an area that, if just for the sake of argument, if most of you want to head in that direction, that we might just need to kind of dial into a little bit and really understand what that means and how applicable it might be.
Okay. Well, it sounds like that's all the questions we have so far, Mark. If you want to.
Oh, sorry, Mayor.
No. Let's say go ahead. Whatever you want to do next.
So in our schedule, we heard from two members of the public, but I did want to make sure that they had an opportunity to express their opinion on this. I'm not sure how many other people you have there, or whether those two have additional things to add. But before we went into a little bit of a voting process here, I thought it might be worthwhile to extend that opportunity one more time.
Can you
Come on up
speak in the
here.
microphone?
Oops, sorry. Can you come up here so we can, just so we can hear you better? Thanks.
The one thing I forgot to mention, right now, downtown is kind of more limited than, where there's a divider down the middle of downtown. They don't have really much of light up signs there. But what is happening is the businesses are doing an end run around your whole ordinance. Like if you go by the bike shop, he has 2 TVs as big as these right in his windows that de facto gives him an electronic sign with the same as the college. And he's got them right on either side of his door. 2 giant ones of those shining, but he's got behind glass. So it scoots you guys' deal completely. That I think should be somewhere in your matrices, when you see that kind of things that go on. And same thing with like the veterans place, BFW. They put on there, when some soldier dies, and if it's lieutenant colonel and he's got a long name and he's got a birthday, they scroll the rest of his name and his statistics because it doesn't fit. So there's some of those things that should be probably brought in here, and also on the color thing, it just seems weird to me to make red bananas.
Yep, that's part of our discussion. Thanks. Yep.
So looking at this, these options, specifically, there's some that would kind of be non-starters for us, like color limitations. Ours are essentially pictures they're static pictures that they don't necessarily move or scroll, but I guess I've never seen one that's all one color. I don't know. That'd be great for certain things, but it just that wouldn't work for us, having one color. On the second page here, where there's basically the last 5 items, allowing messages to change at any interval, basically between 6 and 10 seconds, would be, be something that our signs do every 7 seconds on average, and it can be changed, but they change every 7 seconds or so, and that's to get messages out, and that's messages from the businesses so everybody can be seen because everybody wants to be seen, or maybe even the city has an advertisement out there for an upcoming event or an Amber Alert. I mean, there's so many things that are on our signs on these ones that can change all the time. Clearly, probably the most important one is near the bottom. The second from the last can advertise off-site products. So all of the current is no, and the far right is yes. I mean, that's probably the most important on this list, that we are allowed to do the same thing that your on-premise signs are able to do. As far as some of the other things that were touched on at night, I mean, currently, so we have signs all over the state. We have 10 in central Wisconsin, but we have one that I know of with the city of Weston, and all of them are on all night. I don't know if that's that's just something that's normal for us, that there are still travelers at night. And our signs aren't necessarily in the interior of the River Falls. Of course, they're on the highways, they're on the outsides, and that's goes into off-premise commercial use and industrial. I mean, they're not in inner parts usually. They're usually on the highways. So there are some things on here that would certainly be very important to our stuff because they'd be non-starters. So I guess I'd just like to be in the process as this moves along. I know it's fairly early, but certainly on the right side is a lot of stuff that are what we currently use in our industry, and I think that's why they're on there. So that's all I had.
And Mark, if I could jump in here quick, differentiating between billboards like Mr. Kern's talking about and some of the more stricter performance standards that would occur maybe on Main Street or in our, commercial districts, we can get to that level of granular detail and provide those specifics of, in this district, you can only do, maybe more limitations than you're talking about there. So I don't think we have to do a one size fits all approach for these individual signs. So.
That's correct. You have different zoning districts that you can distinguish between right now that are mapped in different parts of the city. You have, as Emily mentioned earlier, a defined downtown or downtown overlay area we could use to distinguish. We have uh, arterial and collector highways that are designated by the Department of Transportation. That could be a distinguishing thing, an objective thing where you have a certain set of standards there versus not there. So we have a lot of geographic ways to distinguish regulations to fit the setting. Some of these simple words like in this row, do signs have to be turned off all night? Get at that kind of topic a little bit. In the modernizing limits, the option is turn off all night, but hey, it just as the previous speaker mentioned, maybe not along Highway 35 and 65, or for billboard signs. And in the modernize and expand approach, the answer is no, signs don't have to be turned off all night. But maybe for schools that are right in the middle of neighborhoods or churches that are, so people aren't confronted with dealing with that, all night. It reminds me of an old Seinfeld episode with Kramer, if anyone ever saw it. Now I'm getting off track. But definitely we can dive into that fine grain, and we have hints of that here in the matrix.
Okay. So you want to dive
So-
into talking to each individual one now?
Yeah, what I'd love to do, if I can push you guys a little bit there on the plan commission, is to ask maybe the mayor, you can ask people sort of one by one to indicate what their preferred general approach would be, and then what I'll do is put a little thumbs up or in that particular column, and then for each individual, unless you're pure in one of those columns where you have a different opinion on a particular row, you'd also indicate that to me. So if I was a maintain current approach person, but I wanted to improve the definition to reflect LED technology, I would say, let me know that. And some of this might be more obvious than others, but that's sort of my goal here, is to get to the end of this meeting and say, hey, we've got 4 of the 7 members that want to be in this particular column or that particular column, and you could start to feel some confidence that it's a drafted an ordinance that generally followed that approach, that it would be something that you might be able to work with, with modifications as needed at a subsequent meeting.
Okay. Well, we're going to start on one end. Lisa?
Modernize and expand approach.
What?
Modernize and expand approach,
Straight up and down?
for the most part. I mean,
Okay.
there's some verbiage that has to be worked out. I just, after going over this back in the olden days, now doing it again, we're still behind the 8 ball as far as technology, and we've got some locations that are able to do different things. And like Phil said, it's not favoritism. It just so happens the university is allowed to have multicolors on their signage and change, and is it far enough from the road and different things. So to try and treat everyone evenly, things are different. Yeah, and the billboards on the north end are really a whole different issue than the library sign or the church sign. So it's kind of, you may have to have some tweaking on.
But your starting point is the
But yeah,
modern and expand.
Definitely.
Yep. Okay.
I agree with Lisa. Modernize and expand. I feel like the first column is kind of, in the past, we've kind of played situational whack-a-mole. Like, this could possibly happen, so we better build this into the ordinance and that. And I feel like the modernize and expand approach allows for flexibility and having more continuity across, zoning and is included and all of that. And I am having a hard time kind of squaring both of the middle, or the modernize and limit and modernize and expand. I guess what I'm looking for is maybe it's a zoning zoning district approach, and you're checking boxes and saying this sign qualifies because of this, this, and this, or we can't check the box because it's out of compliance. And so I think that's kind of the way I'm looking at it, and I feel like maybe modernize and expand fits my way of thinking for that. So.
Well, I talked a little bit about my thoughts. I'm kind of between modernize and limit and modernize and expand. I agree with Mike about zoning, like having different criteria in different zones. I want to preserve the character of our neighborhoods, the character of our downtown. I'll say right up front, I'm not sure I'm a fan of electronic billboards. But, you know, I'm willing to talk about it, I guess.
Okay. I pretty much agree with everything Diane said. Like it's hard to go either modern and limited or modern and expand. I'm somewhere, there's a sweet spot somewhere in between the two of them that I think, well, we can weed out as we go along, but somewhere towards the right on those boxes. I don't know if that helps you at all.
It does. You're lucky. I'm a more flexible vote recorder than the clerks were yesterday.
I'm all the way left. I want to get rid of every damn electronic sign. Honest to God, I hate them. I hate them with passion. They all need to go. I want signs with like candles on them. I think they're terrible. I think the billboards are horrendous. I think they're all bad. I just don't like them. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
I would say you're most in line with maintaining the current approach. Then.
No, I think the current approach is too lenient. I think we need to get rid of them.
Even more.
Yeah.
I would say I modernize and expand. But like Mike said, I like that idea of using the districts to help us make some of those decisions. And I mean, isn't there science too that can help us determine like how long? If it's on the highway, you can have it up for 7 to 10 seconds and make recommendations. If it's at 25 miles an hour, you can have it up for 10 to 12 seconds that we can make some recommendations for. But I think of it too as kind of a sustainable approach rather than having build a sign or have a vinyl sign made every single time you have an event. This is a different way to approach that.
If I could just chime in here, and I apologize, it's me that you're accommodating, but if you could speak a little closer to whatever microphone is close to you, that would be helpful.
I should probably turn my mic on. There we go. But I think if we can just take into consideration the different zones, the different, I think that would be a great approach.
Yep. Yeah, I'm hearing that theme repeated, over and over again, is that we're not just one place with one type of land use or setting. We're multiple places, and we should be sensitive to the setting.
I'm Patricia LaRue, and I think the modernize and expand as you get out of town, I totally would stand by Tattersall having the most up-to-date messaging that is out there. But then when you get into town, the bank's time and temperature is enough for me. So I would definitely protect our downtown. And then you get into the West Wind. Well, if Tattersall has it, should West Wind get it? But I think the further out you get, the more I'm willing to go with different colors and images.
All right, you tell me if I'm putting you all in the wrong cells here, but and is that everyone there?
Yep.
I have a question. Emily, has there been any public comment from Turnkey's kind of big billboard that they have, electronic signage that they have near a residential area? Has there been any public comments that you've received?
Well, yes. I don't know a lot about that though, because that went beyond us.
Yeah, I think since it's been in, I don't know that we've had people complaining about it. I mean, it may change as the park fills out, you know, and if more businesses are in Sterling Ponds. But I don't know that we've had any complaints.
Well, it doesn't
since-
face any neighborhoods, right? It faces away from neighborhoods. Yeah.
So this was before my time here, but if I'm remembering correctly, Turnkey took the more of ask for forgiveness and not for permission approach to things. So
100%.
I think
100%.
I think in an ideal situation we would have code that would, you know, allow these conversations or kind of maybe find a middle ground. So just a note.
Yeah, I was really new on Plan Commission when that came through. They're like, oh, we already built it. Sorry, what are we gonna do now? And we let them get away with it, which I thought was kind of atrocious. But I think I voted for it. But in retrospect, had I been on Camp Plan Commission longer, I would have told them to tear it down and start over. But when you're new, yes.
Yeah, that was something.
Well, I
Does
think
anyone else have anything they want to kind of elaborate on or provide further direction on following tonight?
Well, one of the things I
Referrals.
was thinking about during this, you know, reading through the matrix and working on this project is people's attitudes kind of change about signage. I really hear the spirit of the River Falls that I moved to in the 90s in the current ordinance, you know, the early 90s. But as people, you know, get used to new technology, I think a lot of it is they kind of they kind of wire their brains to just ignore it. It's furniture, it's off to the side. And, you know, other people, it does catch their attention and so on. And I think if you were to take a person, you know, from the 90s, who's no longer, you know, who never experienced the kind of signage, electronic signage now, they'd be, you know, they would be absolutely, they'd be for remaining to have that column. But I think people just over time get used to the technology.
Is there a Keep Wisconsin Beautiful chapter, like the anti-billboard chapters? Are they around?
You can start it.
I'm gonna start one. I'm telling you. We can go full Edward Abbey and go check. I better not say that. Well, we got sign guy. If his sign falls over, he's gonna come after me. I'm not gonna chop a sign down. Don't worry. Go full Edward Abbey though. Chainsaw.
One of the things, one of the comments cued in my brain, and I'm not implying that you're saying this or that one of the commenters was saying this, but you know, although it seems like modernize and expand is sort of the way to go, but with any regulation, this is regulator guy talking. It's easier to open the door this much, and then if that is working, opening it a little more. It's very hard to open the door this much and then close it up. And so, as we kind of think about this further, you know, keep that in mind. That you know, we might be able to solve everything for, you know, 10, 20 years on this subject. We might, you know, test this kind of idea or some of these ideas, and then in another 2, 3 years say, hey, that wasn't so bad at all. Let's open the door a little bit more.
I guess I just one last thing I would just like to comment about is when you can put those kind of regulations in that talk about, you know, ratios or percentages of, and compared to other, maybe, you know, maybe you're even looking at a stretch of road where there's already a concentration of signs, but you can't add any more because we've already put that many in. And so, and there's some kind of math, if you will, that is part of that. So I don't know if that's, I was trying to kind of see where that would fit in. I know there's some, I noticed you had some ratios and percentages, and I kind of like that as a guide for city staff to be able to enforce and to be able to guide, you know, petitions for signs.
If I can pick up on that, I think we've got some standards for what the buildings in our industrial park look like. You know, there's, I mean, we don't allow just, you know, a pole shed.
Right.
You know, there's some standards for, you know, having it look nice. And I'd like to see some standards for electronic signs as well, so they look nice.
Well, when you talk about percentages and numbers, I'm just thinking of the north end. You know, some areas you've got more concentration of businesses, where in others they're spread out. You know, Ace to Culver's to Walgreens to Dunkin' Donuts to the bank. You know, so if you've got a really big business and a couple little small ones, your percentages, I mean, so keeping that in mind as well.
Right. Yeah, I guess I've kind of mixed two issues there. Maybe it was percentages of, sign surface
Okay.
and then quantity of.
Quantity
Yeah,
of.
so.
The quality issue I didn't touch on here. I appreciate that conversation. It's kind of dealt with in the back door, maybe a little bit on this one. So, you know, for instance, if all things being equal, you'd prefer signs to be monument style, and otherwise, you know, in other words, fairly low to the ground, as opposed to on 30-foot poles. Right. You could say, hey, if you want to do these types of signs, great, but we only allow them in monument configuration, which is our preferred form. There could be other things like that you could integrate to incentivize, you know, good design or incentivize a type of configuration or material of foundation or whatever that conforms with a standard or a desired standard for a particular area.
A lovely brick monument with a TV in the middle of it. Yes, that's what we want to see around town.
No.
I know.
It's better than just a TV.
No.
It's like, look, that gives you enough to work with.
Yeah, how's that for giving you enough information to start with?
I feel good about it. What is your feeling, Emily?
Yes, I just want to thank the commission. This was a very thoughtful discussion.
Okay.
And, you know, again, as we've seen, there's sort of a broad range of ways we could approach this. But I think what we've heard is context matters and character matters. And also, we're in a new era of technology. And so take that into consideration as well. So I think Mark and I can take this feedback and keep working on it and come up with maybe some specific ordinance language that we can take a look at. Did we hit that goal in these various different categories? And again, we don't have a strict timeline on when these ordinances need to be enacted or changed, so there's no pressure for that. We can take our time on it. But we really wanted to use Mark's assistance to get us largely the way there, and then we can continue to work on it as long as we need to make sure that it's something that will fit for the community and meet our goals.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Offers. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mayor, Commission. I greatly appreciate it.
Yep. Take care.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Okay, so let's move on. We're gonna talk about the housing study presentation, and Sam will walk us through this. Now, your presentation can be shorter than the thing itself, right?
I think so, yeah. If I'm very impressed if anybody made it through all the tables and statistics.
I tried.
It took me 3 days.
So as the mayor stated, the next item is the 2022 Maxfield Housing Study Update. Basically, the 2022 Housing Study Update was an update to the 2018 Housing Study that was commissioned by Maxfield Research and Consulting. We'll recap the 2018 Housing Study and go over some top line numbers from the 2022 Housing Study Update, and then talk about some outcomes as a result of those numbers and summarize. So some context: in 2018, the city contracted Maxfield Research and Consulting to complete a comprehensive housing study for the community. The result was a document that provided insight into current demographics, a review of our current housing stock, analysis of for sale housing, analysis on costs in the community and affordability, and a housing needs analysis. While all the information was valuable, the most crucial data was a housing needs analysis, as I stated. This took data on our current demographics, our current housing stock, and projected the need to 2030. This essentially told us how many and what kind of units are projected to be needed between 2018, when the study was conducted, and 2030. The importance of a healthy supply of housing options cannot be understated. A healthy supply keeps prices reasonable and provides options in a fair market. Last year in 2022, after 4 years that included a pandemic, historic market trends, and the completion of the 2020 census, staff thought it would be a good time to get an up-to-date picture of our current housing needs. We contract with Maxfield again to have only the housing needs analysis section updated. The rest of the study from 2018 remains largely relevant. So here you'll see the number of units needed per year according to the 2018 data, and then compared to the 2022 yearly need. Note that these numbers are average annual demand of each unit type needed, and they're not projected total numbers. Both project our need to the year 2030. You'll have the for sale single family and multifamily. You have market rate rental, but also deep and shallow subsidy rental. Shallow subsidy is defined as housing affordable to households that earn between 30 and 60% of the area median income, whereas deep subsidy is for households that earn less than 30% of the area median income. It's projected that we need to be building more per year in 2022 than we did in 2018. This is largely a result of two factors. One, despite a historic amount of units permitted, we did not simply build enough from the years 2018 to now. And two, outside forces that increase the demand for units in River Falls remain. River Falls is an excellent community. People want to live here. It's important to note a couple of other things. First, the 2022 study does take into account the large amount of housing created in 2022 and 2023 so far, and it takes into consideration the unit numbers that are in the development pipeline. So we've been very busy the past year. We've done a lot of housing. This need is in addition to all the housing units that have been permitted. We've done a lot, still have more to go. Second, senior housing remains one of our largest needs and one where we continue to be underbuilt. So we'll get into that. Here's a specific breakdown of the senior housing needs. The study projects only 5 years to 2027. This is due to the variety and the complexity of the different unit types that falls under the senior housing category. Above, you can see some of the different senior housing types. Those are active adult, rental and for sale housing, active adult, affordable, and which differentiates between deep subsidy and shallow subsidy. And again, it's the average year-over-year number needed. The study also counted the need for enhanced senior housing, those being independent living, assisted living, and memory care. The wide variety of need types make it a difficult section to categorize, but the overall numbers make clear that we need more senior housing. It's important to build more units for the current cohort of seniors, but the current generation of seniors is much larger than the generation that will follow. However, Maxfield makes note of this and notes that it's easy to retrofit senior housing no longer needed into other types of units. So some outcomes that we pulled from the study update: our vacancy rate and housing supply remains critically low. At the time the study was conducted, River Falls had just a 0.7 vacancy rate. In 2018, the vacancy rate was 1.2%. So again, despite all that housing we built, it fell 0.5%. A healthy market has a vacancy rate in the range of 5 to 7%. So just to underline, 0.7 to 5 to 7% comparatively should be our target. So we have a for sale housing supply of just 1.6 months. A healthy for sale market has a 6-month supply on average. Another key takeaway: our housing market is an ecosystem where the amount of one type of housing affects the other. For example, a senior citizen might be renting a market rate unit due to the lack of senior housing. Thus, a market rate unit or a market rate renter may be unable to find a unit despite our study saying we have built enough market rate. People do not fit neatly into categories and will live in units that are available and economically feasible. Furthermore, the creation of new units of all kinds has a ripple effect in the market. An individual who lives in an affordable unit and has more money to spend on housing due to a raise or a new job would be tempted to leave their current housing if new market rate rentals were built. This in turn would open another unit of affordable housing back up as that person moved up. To underline this, a survey of residents in a newly built market rate multifamily complex in River Falls found that 32% already lived in River Falls before moving into that newly built building. So that kind of underlines the circulation that occurs just in our market. As a result of the investment in the 2018 housing study and our 2022 update, we now have a better understanding of the housing needs of the community. This continues to allow us to focus our efforts to promote different housing types and focus on subsidizing units with the tools available to us. Additionally, this study is important as we continue to work on the implementation of our comprehensive plan and will guide policy recommendations on items such as tiny homes, accessory dwelling units, and other opportunities to ease housing costs for the community. This data is crucial as we work to ensure the community has adequate housing options. So overall, just a summary, the City of River Falls has made real progress in building housing, specifically market rate rentals. That said, there remains a deep need for new units. This is not unique to River Falls, as the entire country faces a housing shortage, but it is just as true here as it is anywhere. I'll defer back to you. Oh, sorry. You can also review the study on the city website as well.
Yeah, thanks, Sam.
Yep.
Does anybody have any questions for Sam? Thanks for telling us this, Sam. I think the study helps us realize that we're doing all the right things. I think so.
If I can ask a question, you know, for my own knowledge, and you know, anyone who might be listening to this, can you talk about how the city works with developers or housing developers, or encourages them to build units in River Falls?
Yeah, absolutely. So an important thing to remember is just that it is market. You know, the market does have the ultimate effect here, and so the city can do things like, and we're doing this as part of our comprehensive plan, but of being maybe a little bit more intentional on our design standards, being a little bit more intentional on what kind of development is allowed. You know, that doesn't mean completely taking all guardrails off and taking all development review off the table, but, you know, maybe opening up some of the open space requirements or the parking requirements, or providing that flexibility as needed, but still keeping kind of a firm handle on what kind of development comes and ensuring that it's up to the quality that the community has come to expect. But, you know, advertising that we are a pro-growth community is important. Studies like this are important. Developers and builders look at these kind of things, and that's kind of how they take their cues for the business. And also, we are lucky to have a pretty good group of homegrown developers, so to speak, folks that grew up, or didn't grow up, but built their business. Yep, building in the community and kind of understanding the details and the, you know, the intricacies of the community as well. So there's not a one size fits all approach, but there are some things in our toolbox.
Great, thank you.
What's the timeline on the zoning code review and revisions? Because I think that's a big block to a lot of this too. If we're trying to get more housing diversity, you know, I think allowing for more housing diversity in the code would be helpful, because now everything's a PUD. So if we can streamline that, I think it would help with this as well.
Well, so as of last Tuesday, we have now some new policy guidance and goals and direction in the newly adopted comprehensive plan. So we'll be looking at the direction we want to go based on this data and analysis and the feedback we heard from the community through this process, and then prioritizing where to go with our ordinance updates. So soon, the timeline is soon. I'll say that.
I have students looking for things to do, so let me know if you need help.
Okay.
I do have a comment, and when we talked about this several months ago and you guys were going to put this together for us, I spoke to both Emily and Sam, and so I did some homework, and for the entire years of 2017, 2019, we only built 94 single-family houses. We had it was Spring Creek, Knollwood, and Villas of Sterling Ponds. There was no apartments built. We did the comprehensive study, and then in 2019, the Depot, 50 apartments for 55 plus. City Station, 24 market rate apartments, 1300 South Main, 50 affordable housing. Highview Meadows had 22 single. We go to Peregrine Terrace in 2020 with 92 market rate. Sterling Ponds added another single housing unit, and DeSanctis Park, 84 apartments. And then I can go on. I mean, you guys have done a fabulous job getting assisted living, and what people see and what I heard as I was walking around talking to people, they see the buildings, they see the dirt being turned over, they see they don't realize that this is a very deliberate, intentional balancing of what we need. And they just say, oh, there's another building going up. It's like, well, we need this. And now that we've got these market rate, we want a luxury. We want Saturday properties out there with nice luxury ones. And we want the single level with side yards that aren't so big so that people can. So I just hope people are tolerant and understand that there is a pattern here, and we're trying to get things done in the right way, deliberately. And we want people to come here. We don't want to become a static city where, 16,000, that's it, So, and it also, the more vacancies we have, the cheaper property different houses are getting. So I think you guys are doing a good job.
Okay.
Move to adjourn? Or,
No, not
Oh,
yet.
God.
We got one more. Emily, give us a little planning update.
Planning update will be very short. Just in March, Plan Commission and Council did a lot of work. We got a lot of projects through in March. So Oak Hill will be starting construction on the first phase. That's down by South Apollo, south of Maple, because that was approved in March. The Current, they may start a little bit later up on Radio Road by Paulson Road, because we're bringing in water and sewer up Paulson Road as part of the North Loop infrastructure project, and that's going to need to serve their development. But they're anticipating getting underway pretty quickly. Thompson Heights has already started construction site work. That's right up on Paulson Road at the Radio Road area. We are still expecting Saturday properties to come back. They've been working on some equity investors in their project, but they'll be moving forward shortly. We'll see a final plat for Oak Hill for the first phase in probably June or July. So they're going to be getting ready to put a model home in and, get that going. And then the big thing was the Focus River Falls adoption process. So we now have a brand new updated comprehensive plan, bicycle and pedestrian plan, and outdoor rec plan. So thank you for all of your hard work on all of those things. Our next meeting will be on May 2nd. And right now, I don't have any planning applications, but we will be reviewing the TID, the Tax Increment District for Man Valley, because that needs to come before Plan Commission to look at the consistency of the TID plan with the comprehensive plan. So that will be your role there. And then if Mark Roffers and I can work on some of these ordinance things and bring you a draft of that, we'll do that in May as well. With that, any questions? Otherwise, thank you again.
I don't know, it'd be you or Sam, but is there any talk about having to remove the downtown buildings on the west side of Main Street to accommodate the sewer? Not the sewer, the stormwater. We're going to have to is that okay?
Not that I'm aware of, certainly no.
Okay. Okay, because I had heard that because we're going to need to do stormwater reconstruction when the dam comes out, that we're going to have to take out 2 or 3 of our downtown buildings. So, okay.
Haven't heard anything about that.
Okay.
Move to adjourn?
I second.
First and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Sorry to jump
Right.
the gun.
Yeah.
I've got a lecture to build for tomorrow. I'm behind, y'all.
Well, I thought we were going to go.